Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this exciting conversation on artificial intelligence and its tremendous potential for positive impact across many application domains. I'm Andrea Goldsmith. I'm very excited to be the new Dean of Engineering and Applied Science at Princeton University. And I'm thrilled to be joined on this webinar by Vincent, the former dean and a longtime colleague in the School of Engineering and in Electrical Engineering, as well as Tom Siebel, an innovator, entrepreneur, and philanthropist. This should be a really exciting conversation among the three of us. I'd like to just give a few words of introduction as the new dean. So I'm truly thrilled to be leading the School of Engineering and Applied Science in Princeton at this pivotal time. It's very compelling for me because we're planning to grow the School of Engineering significantly by about 50%. And that really gives Princeton the opportunity to increase its impact through engineering and technology and applications of technology. I'm particularly excited to grow engineering within a liberal arts institution so that engineering can really benefit from the broad perspectives that we get from our colleagues across the university, and also that our colleagues can benefit from insights and technological developments that we have as engineers. We're launching a number of really exciting interdisciplinary initiatives within the school, including in data science, particularly around artificial intelligence, as well as in areas of bioengineering, quantum computing, robotics, and smart cities. We also are building a new neighborhood for engineering to bring it closer into the center of campus so that it can serve as a focal point across the university for technology, as well as foster more collaborations within engineering and across engineering and other disciplines. Another exciting aspect of my deanship will be to foster more innovation, entrepreneurship, and industry partnerships within engineering. This is also to increase our impact, and part of the reason why I'm so excited to be part of this webinar today, where we're talking with Tom Siebel about how Princeton and AI at Princeton can help transform many different industries. I'm also committed to enhancing diversity and inclusion at Princeton Engineering because I truly believe that having diverse minds and diverse people in engineering to design our technologies lead to better outcomes and better applications of our technology. So again, I'm excited to be the new dean, and really my goal is to increase the impact of engineering at Princeton within the whole region of New Jersey and the tri-state area and around the world. So with that, I'd like to briefly introduce the two people that are joining me who really need no introduction. First, Tom Siebel, who really doesn't need an introduction. He's the founder, chairman, and chief executive officer of C3.ai, which is a computer software company that provides platform as a service and software as a service applications for really the broad swath of areas that are using data science and artificial intelligence. This is for operating enterprise big data, predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, and Internet of Things solutions. He was the chairman and CEO of Siebel Systems, which merged with Oracle Corporation in 2006. That company was founded in 1993 and became a leader in application software with more than 8,000 employees across 32 countries, over 4,500 corporate customers, and annual revenues in excess of $2 billion. It was a truly transformative company, and that's why I'm so excited to have Tom as part of this dialogue of how we can use AI for innovation and for good. Now, if that doesn't keep Tom busy enough, he, along with his wife, Stacy, are among the nation's leading philanthropists. Established in 1996, the Thomas and Stacy Siebel Foundation funds projects to support energy solutions, educational and research programs, public health, and the homeless and underprivileged. So we're very grateful to Tom for using his tremendous resources, both economic resources, as well as his time and his energy, to make the world and the country a better place. Tom's a graduate of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, where he received a Bachelor of Arts in History, an MBA, and a Master of Science in Computer Science. He's the author of 4 books, including most recently, Digital Transformation, Survive and Thrive in an Era of Mass Extinction. So welcome so much, Tom. We're delighted to have you here. In addition, I'd like to introduce my longtime colleague and friend, Vince Poor. Vince is the Michael Henry Strater University Professor at Princeton University, where he is engaged in research and teaching in wireless networks, energy systems, and related fields. He received his PhD in electrical engineering and computer science from Princeton in 1977. And from then until joining the Princeton faculty in 1990, he was on the faculty of the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. He's also held visiting positions at several universities, including most recently at UC Berkeley and Cambridge. During 2006 to 2016, he served as Dean of Princeton School of Engineering and Applied Science, in which role he led major expansion of the school's size and influence. I'm very grateful to Vince for leaving the school in such excellent shape for me to take over now. Vince is the recipient of numerous awards for both his research and his teaching. To name just a few of his many, many awards and honors, he's a member of the U.S. National Academy of Engineering and the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, and is a foreign member of the Chinese Academy of Sciences, the Royal Society, and other national and international academies. So now that we have the introductions behind us, I want to first thank Tom and Vince for joining me in this wonderful conversation about the promise of artificial intelligence. I just want to remind the audience that this conversation will last about 50 minutes between the three of us, and then we will have 25 minutes for question and answer. If you are on the line, please submit your questions using the Q&A feature that you'll see at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll try to get to all of those. So with that, I'd like to ask Tom to kick it off with some presentation about his tremendous Institute on Digital Transformation. Tom, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Andrea. Let me see. Let's see, start my video. Let's see if this works. How are you doing, Andrea? Am I sharing a screen?
Yes, I see your screen very well. Thank you so much.
A picture on that. Okay, so let me build a little context of the project that we've been up to related to applying AI and digital transformation to the COVID pandemic. To put this into context, at C3.ai, we've spent the last decade working on building a platform that enables organizations to really leverage elastic cloud computing, big data, the Internet of Things, and predictive analytics to build large commercial and industrial scale AI solutions. So this generally falls in the category of what is being called digital transformation. And we spent about 1,000 person years building this technology stack that is a model-driven architecture, and it provides all the services necessary and sufficient for organizations to rapidly design, develop, provision, operate these enterprise scale predictive analytics applications. And these are used across a wide range of industries in oil and gas, defense, intelligence, power, utility industry, banking, financial services, manufacturing. And typical applications are in the area of stochastic optimization, the inventory, demand forecasting, AI-based predictive maintenance, AI-based CRM, production optimization, route optimization, and precision health. And the economic and social benefits from some of these implementations, for example, in energy and digital oil and defense and intelligence, are really quite staggering. So we do this in a wide range of industries in Asia, in North America, and in Europe, but not in China. And so having developed that capability, I mean, what we do is we aggregate very large sets of disparate data into unified federated images. So, and then apply machine learning models against those data sets as they grow in real time to provide, insights. An example would be Enel, which is a large grid operator in Europe. In that case, we've aggregated 100 billion rows of data from 50 unique enterprise information systems and 57 million sensors, including 42 million smart meters. And then we go out to the extranet for weather, terrain, social media. Just that we update 62 billion times a day. Okay, and so the prerequisite is that we aggregate these data into a unified federated image, and then we apply machine learning against these images as they grow. I'm sorry?
They're not seeing the slide.
Oh,
No.
Andrea, are you seeing a slide or not? Let's see, I can't hear you.
It's not, I only see the introductory slide. Have you
Okay, so
got?
let me kill this and start over. Okay, so let me stop and redo it.
Screen share, and then you got to click the two, this one, and then click the two boxes. There you go.
How about now?
Okay, that's good. I see it now.
Okay, so let me move forward. Okay, so let's. Okay, so that I gave, so I won't repeat what we've done. So now, the prerequisite for what we do in every case is we aggregate very large sets of disparate data, structured data, non-structured data, text, images, telemetry, into a unified federated image, be that for fraud detection, be it for production optimization, be it for precision health. So then enter COVID in particularly in the United States, and particularly February, March, and April, and everybody wanted to find a way to contribute. And so we, having done almost $1 billion of work on this, decided to apply our technology to see if we could facilitate some solutions, science-based solutions as it related to COVID. And the initial effort that we've been working on for some years with Vince Poor and Shankar Sastry and others was the formation of the Digital Transformation Institute. And the idea was to collect some of the world's leading scientists in a coordinated effort to advance the science of digital transformation writ large for business, for society, and for government. And so this coalition consists of two national labs, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications and the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, and then a number of leading research institutions, Princeton, MIT, University of Chicago, et cetera. And then this is organized by C3.ai and funded by C3.ai and by Microsoft and by these national labs, by the way. And the idea is that we would do a call for papers every 6 months on some important topic where we think that AI might be able to have a impact. And so the first call for papers, we're getting ready to announce this in the spring. And if not COVID, what? And so the idea behind the Digital Transformation Institute is to fund research awards, fund visiting professors and scientists, curriculum development, data analytics, education program development, industry partnership programs, and the idea that all of the work, that all the fruits of this labor will, at all of these research institutions, will go into the public domain under non-exclusive royalty-free licensing schemes. This has almost a $300 million budget in cash and in kind. And the idea is that we will give 26 research awards a year. And the organizations that, this is administered by Princeton and MIT and Illinois and Berkeley, and they do peer reviews of all these proposals. And so the first call for papers, if not COVID, what? And so that's just what we, Vince and Shankar and I got together and announced at MIT. And we decided that the call for papers would be about eliciting people to do research in advanced AI techniques to mitigate pandemic. This includes, but is not limited to, machine learning methods to mitigate the spread, genome-specific medical protocols, medical bioinformatics methods for drug design and repurposing, design and sharing of clinical trials, modeling, simulation, and prediction of COVID propagation, the efficacy of various social interventions, logistics and optimization analysis for the design of public health strategies, and what have you. And so kind of writ large. And so we put out the idea was that we would do 26 research awards a year. We put out a call for papers in, I think, March or April. And we had 185 responses from the partner universities, from University of Illinois, Berkeley, CMU, Chicago, MIT, and Princeton. And they were, of 185, I think there were about 185 that were qualified. And so after a very rigorous peer review process that was conducted by these institutions themselves, they decided to fund 26 projects. And the review, there were over 500 reviewers involved, and it was pretty robust. And the proposals that have been funded, and what we provide is cash. We provide supercomputing resources in terms of access to 26 petaflop supercomputers at the campus of the University of Illinois and Lawrence Berkeley's labs. We provide massive amounts of Azure resources and unlimited access to the C3.ai platform to do these machine learning experiments. And so the projects that have been funded are generally in the area of mathematical modeling, control and logistics, computational biology, AI for epidemiology, social good and clinical use, imaging and computer vision, intelligent databases and search, vaccine and drug discovery, distributed computing, AI for medical imaging, and then the social impact of COVID. And so this is the idea that all of this research is going to be done within 12 months. And it will all be published, go into the public domain. And the idea that something important, it seems to me that it's just inconceivable that something important isn't going to come out of this to help inform the decision process of our policymakers. The second initiative that we put into place is called the COVID Data Lake. I mean, one of the things that we're very good at is aggregating data into unified federated image. And with the emergence of COVID, now we see the publication of all these kind of quote unquote open source data sources from Johns Hopkins and WHO and NIH and CDC and what have you. And so what we did with the C3 Data Lake is we took basically, if you look at these things, they're basically URLs that go to either these, kind of CSV spreadsheets, or they go to text files, or they go what have you. So they're kind of highly discrete, disintegrated data sources. So we took these data and aggregated them into a unified federated image and established all of the connections between all these data so that we can, so the researcher can now research at an abstraction layer of, whether you're dealing with outbreak location or hospital or vaccine coverage or what have you. And we give a line list to the researchers. So data scientists, as you know, spend all their time kind of wrangling with data, and we have done all of the wrangling. And I believe this is the largest COVID data set that is available publicly. And we've made it available not only to DTI, but to researchers all over the world for free. And this is now updated in real time, virtually every second. So these data are current. And so it's, the requirements were to be able to ingest, these are images, this is text data, this looks like telemetry, it looks like bioinformatics, it's CAT scans, it's what have you. So pretty interesting data integration problem. And we did this from beginning to end. I think we issued our first release in 5 weeks, and now from March to August is about 6 months. We're at the fifth release of this. I think we've aggregated 60 unique data sources into unified federated image from NIH, Johns Hopkins, Milken, the World Bank, Department of Health, COVID project, CDC, you name it. And so it's really quite comprehensive. So this is used both by Digital Transformation Institute and by researchers all around the world. This is being accessed now about 3,000 times a day. And this effort is being funded by that are being provided by Amazon Web Services. Now, finally, then what we've done is we've in the spirit of grand challenges, like you do at Princeton all the time, and we took a page out of Princeton's book and decided to launch a COVID-19 grand challenge, where basically we put out $200,000 in prize money for people to take this corpus of data and perform data science on this corpus of data to discover, new insights into COVID that might become available. So the first prize is $100,000. The second prize, of which there are two, is $25,000. There are four third prizes of $12,000. We launched the competition in September. It is now kind of fully game on. All the submission deadlines will be November 18th, and we will announce the winners on December 9th. And these are the general categories, again, medical protocols, infection rates, comorbidity, drug discovery, what have you. These are the requirements that people complied with. Today, we have 360 teams, 777 participants from 43 countries. 14 of the participants are under the age of 18 years old. And we have many teams from some of the most prestigious institutions in the world: Berkeley, Princeton, MIT, McKinsey, University of Chicago, what have you, who are participating. So our response has been to COVID has been, number one, to kick off the Digital Transformation Institute, where we're seeing a lot of leadership there from the participating institutions. It's just really fun to be part of. Secondly, was the publication of the C3 AI Data Lake, and now the C3 AI Grand Challenge. And the idea is to really get some science generated here so we can get well-informed decisions. So this has been a very exciting project. And Vince, my old friend and colleague, Vince Poor, has been a prime mover in this. So thank you, Vince. And Andrea, thank Princeton for all your leadership in these efforts.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you, Vince, for joining us as well. I'd like to just start off by first thanking Tom for this incredible vision. I mean, data is kind of like the new oil. It's such an important resource, and bringing so much of it together and making it accessible for creative innovators to apply their ideas as to how to use it is incredibly empowering. So thank you for championing this. I wanted to ask you, Tom, when you started this institute, what did you see wasn't being addressed by either industry or academia or other institutions? What were you trying to solve that this institute was uniquely poised to do?
Well, as it relates to digital transformation and the application of AI writ large to business, social, and government processes, I just thought that there was an enormous opportunity to get, synergy going and collaborative research funded, at a very large scale. And so that was the idea. And then when we floated it across, Princeton, MIT, Stanford, Illinois, Carnegie Mellon, everybody kind of pounded on the table and said, this is a great idea. We want to get involved. So now we'll be, going forward, I think we'll be looking at things like the application of AI to precision medicine. We'll be looking at the application of AI to distance learning. I think that's an enormous opportunity. And so I think there's a real opportunity here to just accelerate the advancement of AI techniques for substantial social and economic benefit. And that was the idea. And it looks like it's going to happen.
So let me ask one more follow-up question, then I'll bring Vincent. So this is kind of a public and private partnership, and one of the things that Vince fostered as dean, and I'm also continuing, is how do we create better models for academia and industry and perhaps government to collaborate on solving these grand challenges, given that not any one of those is able to provide those solutions on its own, at least not optimally. So do you have any thoughts about new models for these kinds of partnerships, or is this institute kind of the model that should be a model going forward for these kinds of partnerships?
Well, I think this is a model, and, we wanted to get the job done without, without, knocking on a bunch of doors in Washington, D.C. with hat in hand trying to raise money, because that's just, more pain than it's worth. And so here we just got together with us and Microsoft and funded it. And so we clearly there's a public partnership in here because we have publicly funded research institutions and some of the finest in the world. UC Berkeley, University of Illinois Urbana. We have publicly funded national labs that are they're actively participating in this, including the National Center for Supercomputing Applications and Lawrence Berkeley Labs. We have very active participation from CDC and NIH. So we don't present this as the answer, but we think it is an answer. And without any spending a lot of discussion, without any congressional testimony, without any lobbying on Washington, D.C., we got started, we got to work, and now sparks are flying. And I think, Vince would be, able to address some of the really exciting work that he's doing associated with the institution.
Yeah, so let me bring Vince in with exactly that discussion. So Vince, tell the audience what it's been like to be part of this consortium and how it's changed the way that you do research versus not having this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, in the beginning, when I heard about this, I just looked at it as another great opportunity to work with Tom. We've worked together on many other things in the past. It's always been very productive and a lot of fun, I think. And so I really was happy to have this opportunity again. And it has been really, really terrific. I mean, first of all, I've had two connections with the C3.ai DTI. One is as one of a member of the steering committee, if you will, who's been able to look at the proposals that have come in, and also to talk in advance, as Tom mentioned, about what we might ask for proposals on. And there's been an astonishing array of very interesting work from the highest quality institutions, top researchers. Tom mentioned the breadth of some of these things that we looked at, but it ranges from medical issues to social issues to technical issues, and really, really top-notch work that has come out in response to the call. And as a member of the steering committee, I got to see all of this work, not just things that would relate to my own area of interest. On the other hand, in my own area of interest, I'm also one of the investigators in this first round, and it really stimulated me to think about how some of the things that I have been doing in my research. I'm not an epidemiologist, obviously, but it really stimulated me to think about how some of those things might apply to the current pandemic, and perhaps just the understanding in general of epidemic spread and so forth in the future. It gave me the opportunity to reach out to some of my colleagues at Princeton and elsewhere who are in other fields, particularly Simon Levin, who's a mathematical biologist. I've known him for years, but this is really the first time we've had to work together. Josh Plotkin, another mathematical biologist at Penn, whom I've gotten to know through this. So it's really enriched my my intellectual life tremendously. And I feel like we're doing a lot of good for society as well. So I think it's been a real win-win for me in many different ways.
So let me follow up, Tom. You talked about applying AI to precision medicine. Obviously, we're applying it to COVID, to distance learning. Perhaps a question to both of you. How do you see AI transforming education, medicine, and beyond? What are the most impactful ways we can use AI in these important areas? Tom, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a great question, Andrea, and there's a lot of ground covered there that could be covered there. But we'll take a couple of the examples you mentioned. I believe that precision medicine will be the largest commercial application of artificial intelligence, and for the greatest social and economic benefit of any other use. We have today the capability to aggregate, say, the genome sequences of the population of any country, say the United States, into a unified federated image. Okay, and that along with health history, history of blood chemistry, also history of disease, entire health history of, say, a population of 330 million people. Well, we can aggregate those data in a unified federated image, and it is within our grasp today to build machine learning models that will predict the onset of disease years in advance with very high levels of precision. Well, the benefits of that are obvious. If we can, predict 2, 3, 4 years in advance that somebody's going to be diagnosed with a disease, absent intervention, we can then intervene clinically and avoid the diagnosis of heart disease or whatever, or diabetes or whatever it may be. I think a second area that will be enormously efficacious is going to be AI-assisted medicine. Now, I know there used to be a bunch of TV ads from various companies about how AI engines were going to replace physicians. I personally don't believe that is going to happen. However, there's no question that we will use AI to inform physicians to make better informed diagnoses and better informed treatment protocols. I think a third area will be a natural application of AI is in the area of genome specific treatment protocols. So you combine that with telemedicine, which clearly where this is going, and we're going to be able to offer medical services at much lower cost to much larger populations, including historically underserved populations, and be delivering much higher health care at much lower cost to much larger populations. So this is all a good thing. And I think it's just enormously exciting. I think a second application where we're going to see AI play an impact, I think this COVID disaster that we're all living through does seem to have, no light at the end of the tunnel. But I think that there is some silver lining around these clouds. And one of the areas where we are going to see a benefit out of COVID is in the area of distance learning. I mean, here we have the most prestigious research and teaching institutions on the planet, okay? Princeton, Temple University, Berkeley, UT System, Ecole Polytechnique, Politecnico di Torino, Tsinghua, everybody writ large is all of a sudden forced to do what they've been doing, in a classroom format since the 17th century. Okay. And all of a sudden, with instantaneously being forced to deliver distance learning. Now, I have watched what goes on at Stanford, and I've watched very closely what goes on at Harvard. And we have many students here, many employees at C3, for example, that are involved in online master's programs at the University of Illinois and other places. So I'm pretty familiar with the state of the art. And I think there is, it's a little bit crude right now in terms of what we're using Zoom and whatnot to get this done. It's kind of a blunt instrument. And I think when you have minds this sharp in graduate students and postdocs and professors at Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Tsinghua, Ecole Polytechnique, you name it. Okay, all of a sudden are faced with this problem. The idea that, I as a student of the history of science, I know that necessity is the mother of invention. And, the idea that we're not going to see breakthroughs in this area, I think approaches zero. And so some bright grad student, unlikely to be a professor, just kidding. Okay,
So true.
Is going to come up with
This crowd.
This example is perfect. Okay, this happened to be an undergraduate student. Okay, but is going to come up with a mosaic browser of this domain, right? It's going to change everything. The mosaic browser kind of changed everything about the way we navigate the internet, right? You were there, I was there. We remember that. That was a big change. Changed everything. And I think we're going to see the equivalent of the mosaic browser, which kind of captures the intimacy of a Princeton seminar in distance learning. Okay. And, I think this is a natural application for AI and to be able to advance distance learning. So we're going to see breakthroughs there. And I think the changes, while they will be important for advanced education, the game that you play, okay, they're going to be more important, candidly, in K through 12 and in professional education. These are big breakthroughs. Let's think about what some applications of AI will be. I mean, we can use AI, for example, to really help to deal with not the mass audience, but to deal with each individual and use AI techniques to navigate, complex curricula networks where we don't simply follow the syllabus linearly. We move people to where they should go next based upon who they are, what they brought to the party, the skills they brought to the party. We can use AI for skills assessment, okay, navigation, and we're going to use AI techniques, to really find ways to and distance learn to facilitate the types of intimate communications that take place in the library at Princeton and the student union at the University of Illinois, which is, you and I know, is where all the learning takes place. And I believe more so than the classroom. And we need to get that dynamic of, rubbing elbows by the coffee machine, these kind of serendipitous, synchronous, important interactions in distance learning technology. And I think AI will play a massive role there. And it is one of the game-changing developments that will be forced by these changes that we're all being faced with as a result of COVID.
Vince, what do you want to weigh in with your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I agree with everything that Tom has said. I don't know how much I can add. I will say one thing about the distance learning that you didn't mention, Tom, and that is, in the classroom, when you're face to face with the students, you get a lot of feedback by just looking at them and seeing how they're reacting to what you're saying. And you miss a lot of that when you're online, even though you do have the images of the students and so forth. So I think another area where AI might play a role, and you touched on this a little bit, Tom, but is in trying to give the feedback to an instructor to get a sense of how the students are reacting. Maybe by looking at gesture or other kinds of things through image processing, perhaps there's some way to emulate that experience that the instructor has of getting feedback from students by looking at their faces and their attention, see how their attention is holding up and so forth. So, but otherwise, everything else you said, I think is very much on point. I'll say a little bit about the issue of medicine, but I want to invite Andrea also to weigh in on this, because I know she's also been involved a lot in the medical field of late. But one thing I have been doing just recently is talking to some colleagues at Siemens. Siemens has tens of thousands of diagnostic machines out in the field worldwide. And there are some of them, on many of them, they collect data depending on the agreement they have with the healthcare providers. So they have enormous amount of data coming out of diagnostic machines, and they've created they're creating a digital twin concept for a human body, individualized for each person. And so that allows that, and of course it's very heavily AI driven, and that allows for to look at the interactions among different systems within the body, how that works. Whereas other diagnostic techniques may not be able to do that. So I think even though that's in its infancy, I think that kind of thing where you can put it all together and get one picture of the health of a person, I think that's, as Tom mentioned, I think that's going to be a big game changer in terms of, not only diagnosing disease, but perhaps predicting disease. And I'm very excited about seeing how that turns out. It's not my field at all, but I just, having seen and interacted with people who are doing that, I think it's a really big potential, as I said, a potential game changer. But Andrea, why don't you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I just want to make one comment on the education side, and then I'll touch on medicine. So the thing that's so interesting and talk about silver linings of COVID is we're right now doing the largest unexpected experiment in online education around the world, K through 12, higher education, graduate school, professional education. None of us ever wanted to do this experiment, and especially overnight without any time to prepare. But there is a lot that we can not only learn from these experiments, because every university, every high school, every middle school, every elementary school is going about it a little bit differently. But we have the data to see, you know, how these experiments are working. And so I think we're going to have a tremendous amount of data from, you know, whenever we emerge from COVID that I hope we can use not only to learn how these experiments worked, but also we'll have a significant repository, because so many of these classes are being recorded. You know, so many of these little student sessions are being recorded. We can really go back and look at how this experiment worked, so that when we are back to the classroom, which we all hope is sooner rather than later, we can enhance the way we learn, as well as offer new modes of learning, like you described, Tom, for people that can't afford, you know, the residential experience or can't take 4 years off to get their undergraduate degree. So I'm very excited about possibilities in education and how this period will inform that. Coming to the medicine side, so I'll just touch on one thing that I think is really interesting. So I'm on the board of Medtronic, which is the largest medical device company in the world. And I just want to focus on one of the areas they do, which is diabetes. And the thing that's interesting about diabetes is it's a combination of kind of hard data from looking at your glucose levels and trying to keep things, you know, within a particular range. And then soft data, what are you eating? How are you feeling? Did you go exercise? And the interesting thing is that there's very, you know, clearly labeled data, which is a glucose level. And then there's this more soft data that isn't easy to label. And I think part of the excitement and challenge of bringing data science to medicine is, how do we combine kind of the hard data that we're used to using in AI and the softer data? And then, you know, you could say the same about physicians. They have kind of the hard, you know, data that they read, and then they have their instincts and their knowledge. And how do we bring those different kinds of data together to solve these medical challenges? Tom, do you have any thoughts on that? Because I don't know the answer, but I think it's a very exciting area to.
I think that this idea that, I mean, a lot of people's fear about AI is that we're taking the human out of the loop. And I think in most instances, that fear is both unfounded and it's a mistake to take the human out of the loop. And, you know, I think that this, you know, this genius physician or this genius, you know, airline mechanic, aircraft mechanic, and, you know, these people really do have these skills where they've been fixing, you know, whatever their aircraft is, E3 Sentry, since, you know, 1958. And these guys can close their eyes and, you know, they're the Obi-Wan Kenobi of aircraft maintenance, and they can kind of, you know, put their hand on the cowling, and they know what to do. And these people exist. Okay, they in all fields, in medicine and aerospace and what have you. And so the idea that we're going to replace that with AI, I'm not buying it. Okay, I think what we need to do is just provide these people more information so they will make better decisions. You know, to the extent that they were able to, you know, encapsulate their knowledge in these AI engines, that's a good thing, and we will do that. Okay, and embody some of what they have in this in these machine learning models. But the idea that these machine learning models or these machines are going to replace a human being, I just don't buy it. Okay, and you know, so you know, I don't buy it for a minute. I think, but we are way underestimating the capacity of the human mind and the human spirit. Okay, to think that, you know, some constellation of, you know, 10,000 virtual machines doing, you know, 64-bit floating point operations at 3 gigahertz cycles are going to compete with the human mind. I don't believe it.
Vince, any thoughts on that? Actually, that's a relief. I'm happy to hear that. Vince,
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's a long time before I would want to put myself in the hands of anything other than a human being when it comes to my healthcare or anything important like aircraft mechanics or what have you. I do think that one thing that machine learning does allow is sort of a scale that no individual can encompass, even someone who's been in the field for many, many years. It does allow the bringing in of expertise of multiple humans to bear on problems. So I certainly agree that it's not a substitute for human judgment or for human beings in any way, but I do think it can enhance what humans can do by taking advantage of scale.
I think one of the things we really need to think about, and we need to teach, and we need to teach now at the university level and below and above, are issues related to the ethical implications of AI, because the ethical implications of AI are daunting. And I think that if we don't train people to think properly, this goes to a bad place. And if we look at kind of the interactions of science and technology and sociology over time, we've seen a number of breakthroughs that I think most of us would argue are generally good, like say the Gutenberg press. And this resulted in the Reformation, and all of a sudden everybody can read the Bible in the language of their choice. And now we have the mass promulgation of knowledge. Okay, and so this is all goodness in light, right? But nobody anticipated, the 100 Years' War, the 30 Years' War, massive, religious wars across Europe that lasted, order of 130 years. Some of them are still going on. We look at, most of us who are technologists would look at the Industrial Revolution as a good thing. And the invention of the steam engine and the Jacquard loom, these are seminal inventions, right? That resulted in the Industrial Revolution. And I think, again, most of us would argue this was a good thing. People live longer, they're healthier, we have more employment, we can feed people better, but we can draw a direct line between the steam engine, the Jacquard loom, and child labor, unbelievable, just these horrific labor conditions, okay, in Europe and other places, organized labor, which is a response, and I think a correct response, Marxism, World War I, World War II. I mean, you could draw a direct line from those inventions to these unanticipated consequences. Now, when we get to AI, I think AI is an invention not less impactful than the steam engine, not less impactful than the Gutenberg press. And we can anticipate all sorts of enormous social and economic benefit that will accrue from the application of this technology to business processes, government, social processes, warfare, what have you. However, there are also enormous social and political landmines that unless we anticipate them, we're going to have to live there. And I think we have a very unusual circumstance right now in Washington, D.C., where the government actually seems to be doing its job, okay, in calling these social media companies to task upon what they're doing in terms of here we have 2.2 billion people that are being manipulated at the level of the limbic brain and the release of dopamine. And, everybody knows what this is. That's really a neurotransmitter that kind of drives the pleasure center. And we have all these young people, and we're creating an enormous who are in fact addicted to these technologies, and these companies that are driving it are encouraging this addiction. And we know what the human health consequences are. They're very well documented in terms of loneliness, depression, suicide, self-image issues. I mean, it's horrible. It's horrible. Okay, what we're doing to these people. We're allowing these systems to be weaponized by bad actors and just looking the other way because we're making money. Okay, and we are using these tools that we have at our disposal to basically, and this is unquestionably happening, okay, to manipulate what information is available to like the citizenry at large that will have an effect on the next election. So this is scary stuff. Let's look at our healthcare. Let's look at our precision health example. We will, in not very many years, have accomplished this, where we'll have the system that I described for the United States and France and Germany and the UK, where we will be able to predict with very high levels of precision what disease the three of us are going to be diagnosed with in the next 5 years. Well, maybe one of us is going to be diagnosed with a terminal disease. Do you want to know that? I'm not sure I do. How are these people going to use these data? I mean, the idea that that the corporations are going to act in a beneficial manner, under all these cases, I mean, you can just forget that. I mean, see Facebook for details. And I'm not sure which is more scary, the large corporation or honestly the government, and if you have a single payer situation. But how are these data going to be used? Are they going to be, who cares about pre-existing conditions when we know what you're going to be diagnosed with? Will it be used to ration medicine? Absolutely. Will it be used to set rates? Absolutely. Okay. The implications of, the negative implications of these systems could get us into a, very, Orwellian world very quickly. And, unless my politics aside, I don't really have much use for government, but I think that this is an area where if government does not regulate, we will be very sorry, because because this will go to a bad place.
Touching on the title of this webinar, which is AI for Good, I think you've really elucidated the fact that it can, it can be used for good, but it can also be used for bad. And I think one of the ways I perceive that is that we need people, not just the technologists around the table, but as you say, the ethicists, the social scientists, other people that can help us figure out how to use this incredible tool in good ways and avoid the pitfalls. As you say, it's not just that, the regulators need to know what to regulate. They need to understand, how these things can go down dark paths. I want to spend some time with the Q&A because we've gotten a lot of wonderful questions. So let me turn to those. Please remember to put your questions, if you're listening, in the Q&A chat box. And I'm going to start with the question by someone who claims to be an AI novice, but I don't think that's the case. The question is, can you explain, this is really to Tom, can you explain, well, Vince too, how researchers working on the same data set with the same AI software or AI tools would discover unique insights? How come they wouldn't all come to the same place?
How come they wouldn't all code?
Yeah, why if you have the same data set and we have a set of tools to to apply to these data sets, why are we going to get unique insights? Where's the magic spark that's coming from you funding all these different researchers when they're working on the same data set and with the same toolbox?
Because I'll let Vince comment in a minute, but these craftsmen are not all the same. I mean, the tools on the table might be a hammer and a saw and a pair of pliers, but the craftsmen, the data scientists, the computer science, bring different history, different culture, different skills to the equation, and they approach a problem differently. For example, you might have one person who's looking at it from the perspective of, predicting energy usage on a, home by home basis for every home in Italy. And so you might want to build a machine, you might want to aggregate the data from the Italian grid, which is a big data set. And so you have 5-10 years of data, you're dealing with hundreds of petabytes of data, where you want to predict energy usage, to be able to predict load for whatever reason. And you want to do this for Italy. So you want to build a machine learning model to address Italy. And you do this, and one person will approach it this way. I've seen one of the best data scientists in the world, approach it this way. And this person got very high levels of precision and recall for Sicily. And the rest of Italy, I mean, it was just, it was a mess. The precision recall were unacceptably low. Well, and I remember I watched a group of data scientists, three of whom both of you know very well, okay, wrestle with this problem for 6 months, and they were beating their head against the wall. It was actually energy theft that they were predicting, not usage. And, I thought about it, and, and I said, well, have you guys looked at how hard have you really looked at the data? And I said, get the data, bring it in here. Let's look at it. And so we just rolled around in the data and got dirty. And almost all of the true positives that came from Sicily, because that's where they steal all the energy in Italy, is Sicily. Okay. So what these guys had done is they had basically built a machine learning model that fit well for Sicily. Well, for Sicily, I said, listen, have you guys read any history? I mean, there is no Italy. Okay. I mean, Italy is the amalgamation of hundreds of city states that then became 14 kingdoms. And so I went home that night and printed a map of the 14 kingdoms of Italy. And that map, the utility in Italy, by the way, is called Enel. And they have these things called DTRs, which are the regions. That map of the 14 kingdoms of Italy maps exactly to the regions that they have. And I said, listen, you guys, you don't need to build a machine learning model for Italy. You need to build one for each of the 14 kingdoms of Italy. And they did that. And 2 weeks later, they've increased the precision recall by an order of magnitude. The point is, people think differently. They bring whole different, there's the idea that that AI is just mechanistic and deterministic is not the way it works. Okay, the tools that people use and the way they think about it is very much a function of the where they come from, how they're trained, and the way they think. Vince?
Yeah, I would. I mean, you got it to it before I did. I was going to say also that there's a lot of craft in not only in AI, but in all of science and all of technology development and research. There's a lot of craftsmanship there, and it's. But I specifically, I think the questioner asked about the COVID study. And part of it is this data sets that Tom has mentioned. Is the data lake is called is enormous. There are many types of data there: medical data, public health data, other kinds of demographic data, and so forth. So no single researcher will be looking at all of that data. I just don't think it's possible. So there are two aspects of it. One is the scale of the data is immense. And the other is like Tom said, it's a craft. So people are going to researchers are going to bring their own perspectives into this. It doesn't mean that they're wrong, but there is the human element in all of this things that we're talking about.
The last comment I would add is, as it relates to the DTI and the COVID research we're doing, the reason that the 26 research groups won't come up with the same answer is they're working on 26, entirely unique questions, that have almost no intersection. And so one might be related to drug discovery, one is related to efficacy of social mitigation, one is related to the correlation between comorbidity and mortality rates, et cetera. So the idea that they're going to come up with the same answer when they're asking completely different questions, I think is highly unlikely.
Yeah, and just to build, they're asking different questions and they're bringing different domain knowledge. I mean, in my own work in AI and machine learning, I found that, I work in communications and I understand that field very well. So the models that I develop to apply AI and machine learning is based in part on my own knowledge of my domain expertise, as well as the AI tools. And all these different teams are bringing different domain knowledge to solve these problems. The other point I wanted to make, and Tom, I love your story about the energy theft in Italy, is that you're a historian. That's what you studied in your undergrad. And I think having this breadth of knowledge, not just the engineering knowledge or the domain knowledge in engineering or medicine or health, but this broader liberal arts education, I think adds a lot of value. So that's what Princeton has, is its unique secret sauce in terms of bringing engineers that are educated more broadly, having that broad perspective can be used to solve these problems in different ways than if you're just thinking about it from a technical perspective. I'm going to bring in another question, which you touched on a little bit, Tom, on the learning side, but I wanted to elaborate on it some. This era, as you said, we're missing out on these impromptu conversations. We're missing out on, bumping into someone in the hallway or walking down to somebody's desk just to talk about what you did last night, and that leads to a conversation that you never expected to happen. How can we use AI and distance learning and other tools to try to replicate that? Because in my own view, the innovation engine, coming up with new ideas is really grounded in those kinds of interactions, and we're losing all of those now. So do you see technology develop that will help us have those kinds of interactions even when we're doing it remotely?
I think it's unquestionable that we have seen, and we will continue to see, okay, massive developments that facilitate distance interaction, okay, and distance professional interaction and distance learning, just like we are doing right here and right now. And this would have been impossible, or say very difficult 5 years ago, even 5 years ago. But that being said, I think the idea that we are going to come up with a substitute for people like working elbow to elbow, okay, on a focused problem, I don't think we are. I think that is beyond science, okay, and I think that we will facilitate it, but there will be no substitute for the three people who worked 23-hour days for 52 weeks to invent the transistor or whatever it might be. So I think that ultimately people will be getting together where there's innovation required, okay, and invention required, where you're doing something non-trivial. I think people will get together in teams and they'll be rubbing elbows at the coffee machine.
Vince, do you have any thoughts on
Well, yeah, again, I couldn't agree more. I mean, right now, this Zoom life that we're all living is working pretty well, but we're basically living off of human relationships that we've built over the years before that. So like all three of us know each other very well. We've for years, right? And so we've been in the same room together, we've talked together, we've eaten together, all those things. And I think if you get away from that, at some point, that's going to dissipate. If this was the first time we had seen one another, it would be a much different conversation. And I think Tom is right. We're going to have to get back to, that human interaction. Now, with regard to the question that the person asked, I think we can do better than what we've been doing now, which is, a lot of faces on a screen. There may be ways to create a little bit more serendipity with online interaction. But at some point, we're going to have to be in the same room with people again, I think, to get back to that real creative environment that we've seen in the past.
I wonder if virtual reality could play a role. If the three of us popped up in a room with 3D, images of each other, that might be better than this two-dimensional Zoom screen. And you could go in and out of rooms. And I know that there's some technologists that are working on things like that. It's highly imperfect still, but, and there is no substitute for in-person interactions for sure. But I do think the online world is working better than any of us expected. I haven't actually been in a room with Tom, which makes me sad. And I hope we change that at some point. But, nevertheless, I think we are able to interact better, and perhaps it's an incremental stage. We go beyond screens to, maybe 3D images or something like that. It's an exciting technical challenge. I'm going to move to another question, which is about high-speed computing power. So both around the DTI awards, but maybe more broadly, is that one of the major bottlenecks to advances in data science and AI?
No, I think that bottleneck has effectively been removed, okay, with the elastic cloud. It wasn't that long ago, really, when we were programming to 8-bit devices that were running at 800 kilohertz cycles or something. And today we can spool up in the elastic cloud virtually an infinite number of virtual machines, each of which is performing 64-bit floating point operations at 3 gigahertz cycles. We have, it wasn't that long ago, and certainly the three of us, and I expect many people on this call can remember when memory was something that we moved in and out of a machine room with a forklift. Okay, well, those days are gone. And today we can store, we have access, to virtually, unlimited data storage at a cost that is dropping like a knife. We have access to, unlimited, virtually unlimited computational capacity. So I think that is effectively a constraint that has been removed. And as a result of that, so I fundamentally, if you look at this not too literally, okay, I would argue that Moore's law is as its effect on, the cost, when we think about the cost of computing, not exactly, how many transistors we might fit on a chip, is dramatically accelerating. And so I think this is a constraint that's been removed, and it is one of the things that is really fueling this massive advancement in artificial intelligence and digital transformation. And we can expect to see that advancement accelerate in the coming decade.
Yeah, this used to be a major anxiety of researchers, getting enough computing power, and that's basically gone. It's basically gone. So, maybe it'll come back someday in the future, but I think for right now, we're in a really good place with computing power.
But that's computing power in the cloud, right? So if we want AI on our devices, then we either have to improve the computing power on the devices or our networking, right? So that we can send it all to the cloud and do the processing there. Which one of those do you think will happen first?
Well, of course, Andrea knows this very well. I mean, we're working on pushing the computing out to the edge of the network. So you don't have to work the cloud. The cloud actually becomes the fog, as we call it, down at the edge of the network. And I think that's one of the advances where, individual devices, which may by themselves not be able to have the computing power that you need, you can share the computing power of multiple edge devices in order to get much more powerful computing all the way out at the edge without worrying about necessarily going back into the cloud. So that's one solution. But yeah, that is actually a limitation if you're thinking about mobile computing and developing these kinds of algorithms that can work well in that context.
But then we look at the work that Jensen Huang and others are doing at NVIDIA. I mean, it's truly remarkable what these guys are doing with these graphical processing units.
Yes, I agree.
It's staggering. This is computing capacity the size of a credit card, that was inconceivable 20 years ago, inconceivable. And so it's, I think the computational capacity that we'll have in our pocket in 5 years will rival that of the Blue Waters machine at the University of Illinois.
Yeah, and it's interesting because to me that drives home a little bit the fact that data science is not just software, but there's also tremendous need for hardware advances as well. The next question I want to ask, which is a beautiful question, is how are we going to use AI to discover people's talents to help society to develop their best natural abilities and desires? Not an easy question.
I think this is a very scary place. Okay, and so I think when we get into the interaction of AI and social systems, I think there is a real problem with cultural bias. Okay, and we really need to be hypersensitive to using AI to perpetuate cultural bias. I'll give you an example that's not really far off. I mean, one of the undersecretary of one of our defense agencies that we do a lot of business with was in my office not too long ago. And we're involved in a number of projects where we're doing AI on physical systems. We're looking at torque, rotational velocity, altitude, temperature, okay, pressure, what have you. So there are no bias in those data. Those are just natural phenomena. But he approached me and he says, well, Tom, doesn't matter which department it was, there are 3 of them. So it was one of the 3, okay, defense departments of defense. And he said, Tom, I want you to build an AI engine with us, okay, to handle HR for this department. And we want to use this to determine, who has what skill sets, who to assign to what job, who to promote. And I said, Mr. Secretary, with all due respect, I think this is a mistake. And furthermore, if you decide to go forward with it, we won't do it. I said, I think this goes to a bad place. If you do this, you're going to have to read about yourself on the front of the New York Times in 2 years. You're going to be called in front of Congress to testify, because I can save us the 6 months to build the machine learning model, and I'll tell you what the answer is. I mean, the answer is the person you're going to sign, the person you're going to promote is a white male, went to West Point, hard stop. Okay, and so we need to be really careful about this as it relates to HR systems, promotion, skills assessment, because it will perpetuate bias. How about criminal justice? I mean, were we to use any AI engine, supervised, unsupervised, deep learning techniques to determine, who we're going to incarcerate in the next 5 years, what that answer is, okay? And nobody wants to see it. So I think this is an area, these are areas that we need to teach, we need to talk about, and people need to understand. And with all due respect, Andrea, I get this, and people tell me this too, that we need to hire an ethicist, okay, and delegate this to an ethicist. I don't think this is delegatable, okay? I don't think you can delegate the difference between right and wrong to a subordinate, because we're responsible for what's
absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, that was my implication, is that having engineers that are broadly educated and understand the broader context of the technology they're developing is crucial to avoid some of these pitfalls, and even understand that there is bias in AI and bias in the data that you're looking at, and factor that into the algorithms that we develop. I do think it helps to have a broader perspective around the table, including an ethicist at the table, but not delegating to them to fix these things. We have 1 more minute. Vince, do you want to weigh in on any of this? And then
Well, I was just going to say, we used to say about computer programs, garbage in, garbage out. I think we can say about AI, we can say bias in, bias out. If we don't get the bias out of the data, if we're going to use AI for things like was just suggested by Tom's colleague, we have to be very, very careful about what kind of data we put in there.
And also how we apply these AI tools.
How we apply them, and any bias that's there, and they learn from the past. If there's past bias, they're just going to learn it. A good AI algorithm will learn that, and that's not what we want.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. Well, we're at 1:15. I have to say, this has been such an enjoyable conversation. I'm sure we could go on for hours, but I don't want to take any more of your time and the wonderful audience's time. I'm sorry that I didn't have more time to get to all the questions, but this was a wonderful discussion. Tom and Vince, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and insights and time with us. And I look forward to many more discussions about the Institute, about how we can use AI for good, and how we can partner with universities and industry and government to really harness this tool in ways that will make society a better place. So thank you all for joining, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Thank you, Andrea. Bye-bye. Thank you all.